Last month, 181 of America's most influential CEOs put out a statement redefining their roles as leaders. Chasing the bottom line, they told their shareholders, is no longer enough. Rather than seeing their organizations in isolation, rather than simply chasing more growth and competing for bigger numbers, these CEOs, including those of organizations such as Apple and Amazon, have recognized that their organizations have to adapt in a changing world. It's not just what you do that matters anymore, it's how you do it. In addition to their responsibilities to their boards and investors, they set out a simple statement that included the following commitments: delivering value to our customers, investing in our employees, dealing fairly and ethically with our suppliers, supporting the communities in which we work. The statement then went on to say, if companies fail to recognize that the success of our system is dependent on inclusive, long-term growth, many will raise legitimate questions about the role of large employers in our society. There's some really important messages in there, timely messages. And the big takeaway message for me is that in a complex and uncertain world, is that leadership and success has to be defined and pursued in a spirit of partnership, both with those within our organizations, but also those beyond them as well. We may be, it seems, at the dawn of an era of inclusive leadership. So at a time, colleagues, when we are bombarded with depressing news, with negativity, with social media anger, of us and them polarized arguments and agendas, can we hope that leaders are creating something better and something more profound right now? And I think we can. And I think it's crucial that the Academy Trust leaders pave the way and show the way here too. Now, focusing on growth and focusing on the bottom line results matters. Whether you're in a private sector organization that's got to balance the books, keep business viable, keep people in employment, or like us and like yourselves, trying to lead in a highly accountable and still financially weak public sector, the bottom line matters. But as CEOs, it's how we go about achieving that growth and improvement that matters. And of course, the legacy we create for the longer term beyond the bottom line. That's why we all get out of bed in the morning. This is about legacy in the roundest sense to our children and young people and the communities in which they live and grow. So the theme of our conference today is Academy Trusts at the heart of their communities. And I couldn't think of a more timely topic for this year's conference. And it's a real honour, colleagues, to welcome you today, our Trust Leaders members from right across the country to Nottingham. Nottingham is a great place if you want to visit a successful Academy Trust, by the way. And it's a bad place right now if you enjoy watching successful football clubs. I say that from living out both experiences in the last 12 months. Last season's game between Notts County and Mansfield Town is 90 minutes of my life I will never get back. Although I did spend them with my dad, so it was okay. Yet, Academy Trusts can learn something from good football clubs. Like many of our good football clubs and sports clubs, trusts have huge potential to be at the heart of their communities, to be part of the identity and the fabric of their communities, loved by their communities, supported by their communities, and perhaps even owned by them. I'm sure we'll come back onto that a little later today. In any case, I believe Academy Trusts and Academy Trust leaders can be at the forefront of this new era of more inclusive, community-focused leadership. Like some of those businesses and organisations across the economy, Academy Trusts have a choice to make right now. They can become the caricature that seems to have stuck, distant and removed, obsessively focused on growth and bigger numbers and what the powers that be in government define as successful, often, in some cases, seen to be working in spite of their communities, or do something more profound, with a spirit of partnership, looking outwards, looking to the passion, the knowledge, and the capacity and aspirations of those around us, within and beyond our organisations, to find the best way forward and to achieve sustainable success together. Now, if you think that sounds warm and fuzzy, let's consider the context just a little more. We live in interesting times, even if we think about the last 24 hours. Looking upwards for solutions or strategies is not as helpful as it once was. The well has run a little dry. We can no longer rely on stable or predictable political context or political leadership. Political leadership is uncertain, it's lacking in consistency. We've had 4 governments in 5 years and 5 education secretaries in just over 5 years. Austerity still bites, and in the quagmire of Brexit, politicians may be able to promise more money, but they're not providing vision or strategy for this system. The challenges that threaten to hold back our pupils and their families, from mental health to gang violence, poor speech and language development to poverty, are becoming much more complex. You know this better than I do. And the pace of change, driven predominantly by technology, is revolutionising how we all work and socialise. So the CEO's group message that I mentioned at the beginning is clear. The role can no longer be just about running an efficient organisation that chases bigger numbers and ticks the shareholders, or in our case, the government's boxes. It's also about having an even greater premium on CEOs to provide leadership and strategy in a world that really lacks it right now. Isn't that what your autonomy is all about? The constant in all of this needs to be you, trust leaders, together with the children, young people, and the communities you serve. You are the constant. I thought Steve Lancashire put this really well in his tweet following the appointment of the latest Secretary of State. I think we can all relate to that rather healthy leadership mindset. So the time has come for the reference point for the Academy Trust sector to be less the politicians and the top-down accountability system, important though that is, and will remain, and much more about the sense of partnership between Academy Trusts and the communities they serve. A partnership firmly centred on serving this generation of children and young people. And I believe you as CEOs are and should be at the heart of that relationship. If we look at the trends for global organisations, the CEO role is certainly changing. Take this research from the consultancy organisation EY and apply it to your own context. There is a widespread perception that national governments have failed to respond effectively, individually or collectively, to global challenges. As corporations have grown more powerful, employees, customers, and other stakeholders expect CEOs to lead the way in addressing global challenges. 71% of employees globally believe it's critically important for their CEO to respond to global challenges, with 76% of the general population agreeing that they want CEOs to take the lead on change instead of waiting for governments to act. Now, the focus in this research is global, but I believe we're seeing exactly this sentiment around local and regional level organisations too. So as well as the theme of our conference today being about Academy Trusts at the heart of their communities, the theme of my speech today is CEOs as community leaders. Community is a broad term. It has many interpretations. I want us today to think about community in the broadest possible sense. Within our communities are the employers making sense of technological change and artificial intelligence that is coming to dominate young people's lives and revolutionise the world of work, which they will all walk into. There are the nurseries at the forefront of speech and language development and school readiness, the largest nursery chain we will hear from later today. The higher education institutions who can help raise aspiration and informed curricula in partnership with your teachers and leaders. The health and social organisations and charities who are focused on mental and physical well-being in our communities for parents and children. The community leaders, one of whom again we will hear from later today, focused on avoiding gang violence and raising aspiration amongst our most deprived and disengaged young people. The professionals, young and old, who want to give back and to help govern organisations with a big stake in their communities, not least academy trusts. And then there are the growing numbers of retired people, including former teachers, more and more of them by the month, who want to give their time and make a difference to children's lives through volunteerism. And of course, the people who want to serve their communities and see their role as serving their communities as teachers. Serving their communities, not necessarily a system. The potential for generating social and professional capital is enormous. It's enormous. This isn't about CEOs taking on more responsibility and all of society's ills. I want to be really clear on that today. On the contrary. On the doorstep lies enormous potential, not just for working together and sharing information with others, but for creating and shaping the solutions together as well. Growing our organisations and the system around us to meet the huge opportunities and the complex challenges that face this particular generation. The sheer complexity of some of the issues we face and the lack of money and people around to solve them almost demands it. However, at last year's annual conference, I described Academy Trust CEOs as conductors of an orchestra. I think Academy Trusts and CEOs in particular can really step up here and are beginning to do so. Far from being seen as remote, overpaid and corporate figures, I think we are seeing the Trust CEO role being redefined in exactly the way forward-thinking CEOs envisaged. CEOs as people who are figureheads in their communities, championing children and young people, bringing organisations and people together around the needs and priorities of a locality's pupils, and shaping their trusts as employers of choice in their communities. That is a far cry from the caricature that some in the media would like to paint of a matte CEO. But it does require a shift in mindset in some trusts, and certainly at a system level. As with the CEOs I mentioned at the beginning, I think this is about a recalibration, as it were, of the CEO role. Why does this begin with trusts? To be frank, there is a leadership vacuum, and you are well placed to fill it. Now, as a head teacher of a single school, I think the conductor task that I'm talking about here is almost impossible at the level we're envisaging. As a leader of a trust, a major local employer and an organisation, you have the scale and you have the local influence to really shape the landscape around you and around your pupils. You can get the meetings with and the backing of local employers. You can work with the CEO of the Foundation Health Trust or the Dean of the City University. You can make a speech at the local chamber meeting or get a regular column in a town newspaper. CEOs have a new level of leadership calling to shape a shared narrative and sense of partnership with all of those who are invested in children and young people's lives and futures. Yet today, I want to begin with a provocation. Communities do not yet feature sufficiently in the mindset of enough academy trusts. Later, you'll be hearing more on our research with our partners, The Key, but I want to share something quite challenging that emerged from those findings. The issue of community engagement was almost bottom of the list of CEO priorities right now. Of course, financial viability, growth, recruitment and retention were all there. You would expect money and curriculum to top such a list right now. However, what we intend to consider today is that without community engagement, without putting academy trusts at the heart of their communities, some of these challenges will be very hard to address indeed. We will forever be in reactive rather than proactive mode, looking to an ever-changing band of politicians to set strategy and direction, rather than looking to the wisdom, capacity, and passion of the communities around us, first and foremost. A trust with a strong community identity and role will enthuse local people to work for it. It will find it easier to fundraise and to bring in volunteers. It will find it easier to work with local partners such as employers and higher education institutions on enhancing the curriculum. And it will get the backing and support of parents for serving more schools. Community can't be at the bottom of the list for CEOs, and we need to change that. Now, as a sector, there's a long way to go. There is a mixed picture, but the perception is not necessarily a good one. Last year, the Education Select Committee in the House of Commons wrote to Lord Agnew stating that parents, staff and students are in the dark over who is running their schools and that decisions are being made behind closed doors. But more optimistically, over the summer, the NGA's excellent report on Academy Trust governance stated that whereas some Academy Trusts struggle to engage with their community, others are putting community at the heart of what they do. In many cases, boards are keen to get buy-in from the wider school community. This includes working closely with parents, the local authority, and employers, and consulting with these groups to gain their input into the creation of a trust vision. Things are moving in the right direction. So today, I want us to reflect on and begin to take forward this notion of Academy Trusts as community-focused organisations. Good corporate governance and organisation, yes, absolutely. We've got to get that right. But underpinned and defined by service to the community. I think if we are to address the criticism and to win hearts and minds, bringing people with us, if we are to mitigate some of the challenges of austerity and drawing on volunteers and accessing wider funding and resource, if we are to establish Academy Trusts as employers of choice, enthusing talented and passionate local people to work with us, and if we are to prepare children and young people to thrive in their lives today and in the local and global economy, working in partnership with employers and those who support children, we need to bring things back much closer to community leadership. Academy Trusts can then finally shake off the perception of being a flagship policy of Michael Gove to being a force for community vision, greater cohesion and partnership, and representing an exciting future that enthuses and galvanises those around us. Now, what kind of leadership does this require? Over the last 2 years, or over the last year or two, I've had the privilege of visiting dozens of Academy Trusts, many of you in the room today. And I am impressed by the pockets of work that are emerging, where Academy Trusts, led by their CEOs, are forging deeper and strategic relationships with other stakeholders in their local areas. Now, I share these examples not to put people on a pedestal and not to say this is the right way to do it, but just as some good examples of this in action. I had the chance to visit the Wellspring Trust in South Yorkshire, and Mark is with us today. They have recognised that the mental health and well-being of this generation of pupils is a major challenge, so have developed a partnership with the local clinical commissioning group to provide frontline mental health support for young people in schools. As a result of this partnership and the funding it brings, Wellspring has developed services working with local charities and health practitioners for pupils in 10 schools across the Barnsley area, some of which are not even in the Academy Trust. From frontline counselling services for pupils to mental health first aid training and support for staff. One parent quoted on the scheme said, "We have come such a long way in the 12 short weeks you have been involved and achieved more than we have in the last 2 years. Prior to your intervention, we felt lost and alone, but this is no longer the case." That's an Academy Trust making a difference and adding value to families and communities. Rachel Gax, our networks manager, had the opportunity to case study the Maritime Trust in London, the Transform Trust in Nottingham, and Victoria Academies Trust in the West Midlands, looking at how those trusts are working with local people to develop an entrepreneurial curriculum for pupils, including involving parents and local businesses. People from within and across the community, including local businesses, are supporting those schools to develop inspiring educational experiences informed by the realities of self-employed and entrepreneurial people. They're already preparing children for a rapidly evolving local jobs market and with the skills and traits that will stand them in good stead throughout their lives. I visited the Chiltern Trust in Bedfordshire, which has developed numerous strategic partnerships locally, including one with Luton Football Club. The CEO and the head of the teaching school are on the board of the club, And when a pupil sadly lost their life last year, the club's first team came in to spend a day with the pupils. The Trust's PE teachers received training from the club. The Trust is engaged with the FA's Reading Stars initiative through its relationship with the club. And the club is also running an initiative to ensure the hardest to reach pupils are supported to be physically active and well. More widely, the Chiltern Trust has made a commitment that at least one member of the Trust's senior executive team will attend every major community event in the town, with the CEO modelling that expectation. Members of key organisations across the town are also on local governing bodies, from local charities, community radio stations, food banks and mosques. And I do think that those trusts who are losing their local governing bodies are missing an opportunity, in fact, to perhaps reform rather than dispense with them, so that they truly reflect and bring on board wider community leadership. That's particularly important in more geographically dispersed trusts. And finally, I met the Chat Academies Trust in London, which has completed a project with Save the Children to support parental outreach and has a long-standing relationship with 2 local parents' charities who support parents with parenting skills and developing employability skills. Parents are now queuing up to volunteer and support those schools. In each of those cases, the CEO was led from the front in shaping the leadership narrative around the Trust's place in its community, prioritising and putting the impetus behind those relationships and identifying the common goals, which almost always centre on raising aspirations and improving the lives of children and their families, to prepare the next generation of those communities as best they can for life and work. Those trusts are generating enormous professional and social capital. Now, leading an academy trust is hard work. It's hard work. And I know that building community relationships is time-consuming and it's fraught with failure as well as success. Recent analysis by INSEAD Business School discussed the growth of strategic partnerships between organisations and their partners, and the fact that between 60% and 70% of alliances fail or at least face some difficulties. The article suggests that partnerships in many respects resemble marriages and puts forward the following top tips for successful strategic alliances. Be selective and faithful. Make sure you find the one. I think in the case of academy trusts, more than one partner is absolutely fine. But do make sure that you have those shared goals, the shared values, and the shared commitment, almost always centred around pupils. Find a win-win. Are you working together, aiming for the same goals and ambitions? Ensure alignment. Create a simple contract. I know those trusts that really do engage volunteers now are doing so in a formal way, employing them as they would do an employee, contracting them as they would do an employee to ensure that commitment and that relationship is firm. Invest alongside one another. Are you investing in your partners and are they investing in you? Push connections deeper into the organisation. Create ownership and draw upon those connections at all levels within your trusts, including, as I said, local governing bodies. Give those partnerships time, but make sure they're accountable as well, that they are having impact. Balance leading and lagging indicators. Deliver on your end of the bargain. Live up to expectations. Blend formal governance and informal collaboration. Make sure that there's some oversight of it and people have ownership of it. And be open to different ways of collaborating. Always keep your relationship fresh by trying new things. As I approach my 10th year of marriage next year, perhaps I should stick the INSEAD tips on my fridge. I'm beginning to see trustees and CEOs make external partnerships a priority, and I'm encouraged by how many are embarking on those partnerships with due diligence. Do those they work with share the values, wish to invest time, energy or money, and wish to be accountable for shared outcomes? The danger is, if we don't stick to some of these principles, rather than developing successful partnership working, we will create collaborative overload or exhaustion. And I think some academy trusts may already be in that situation in terms of their relationships within the sector. Too much undisciplined and unfocused behaviour. I want to conclude today by saying a little about accountability here as well. If academy trusts really are going to be at the heart of their communities, they need to be accountable to them too. If the onus of accountability is completely focused on top-down measures of success, looking upwards to government for guidance and challenge, then it will be hard for trusts to be responsive and driven by those they ultimately serve to be true community organisations. New research last week found that about half of parents consider academy trusts to be unaccountable. I was really impressed to see one trust this year, and that I'm sure there are a few, that had taken a lead here, particularly around its accountability to parents. Bellevue Park Trust asked parents in all schools across the trust the same questions. Not only did they ask questions such as, do their children enjoy coming to school? Would they recommend their child's school to others? And whether they are satisfied with the school's leadership and management. They also seek detailed feedback from parents on what they value and areas for improvement. The trust reports back to parents on how it is taking their feedback on board. For 2 consecutive years now, it has placed the trust-wide results in the public domain, on its website and on social media. Now done, the intention is to show progress and impact around parental satisfaction and engagement with the trust for the world to see. That's commitment to community accountability. One of our members here today, Cathal Lynch, based in the West Midlands, has taken a similar approach in a school improvement model that he has developed and is about to be published in a book with John Catt. The model is using annual parental survey results from across the trust and staff survey as well to inform and drive many of the school improvement priorities, regularly reporting back to parents publicly on implementation and success. It's a simple fact of life that what gets measured gets done. So backing up community-focused leadership with community-focused accountability will make the chances of success here much higher. Gandhi famously said, leadership was once about muscle. Now it's about getting along with people. We don't want our Academy Trust CEOs to be leaders with muscle, chasing bigger numbers, pleasing ministers, and building corporate empires. I think most aren't doing that, and I know many. But let's be frank, that's still the perception. We want our leaders to be the facilitators of a better world. That begins in our communities. When I wrote my book, Being the CEO, earlier this year, I said that the most important trait of a CEO is humility. The second, ironically, is self-confidence. Self-confidence as a CEO comes from approaching the world, our communities, with a sense of humility. Humility in the face of the potential, the wisdom, and the social and professional capital that lies within them. Our confidence, our ability to get the job done, increasingly comes from how we work with and learn from others. Mother Teresa said this, "None of us, including me, ever do great things. But we can all do small things with great love, and together we can do something wonderful." Nothing binds communities of people together. Nothing binds communities of people together like service to the next generation. As CEOs, you are the people that not only have the scale and the influence, you also have the galvanizing call to arms. The service to children, it transcends sectors and it transcends generations. As CEOs leading in a complex and uncertain world, your job is to create that sense of doing that together. With great love, hope, ambition, and togetherness, you can achieve something wonderful. I hope today provides you with plenty of inspiration, ideas, and reflection on how to not only be effective leaders of your organisations, but great and influential leaders within your communities. Seizing the opportunities to include others and to shape a context in which all children and young people thrive. If we can redefine the Academy Trust sector as one that not only achieves great outcomes and efficiencies, but does so in a spirit of service to and partnership with the communities around us and around our pupils, we can set the system up for a long, sustainable future that truly makes a difference to children and young people's lives. Thank you for listening.